What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smithy with another GSD mode interview. Every single week we interview top entrepreneurs and just straight up top badasses out there dominating their space. These are people choosing to not live a life of mediocrity, but instead to go out there and create amazing, big, epic lives for themselves and their families. So today, you guys, we got an amazing guest on the show, entrepreneur, speaker. This dude's done a lot of just amazing, big things inside his entrepreneur career, if you will. So really excited to have Jamail Larkins at the show. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Well, thank you very much, Josh, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, no, I'm excited, man. So, I know that you run and operate two very successful companies. I mean, dude, you're a lot. You're a pilot. You've done a lot of stuff, and you started at a very young age with this. Before we jump into what you're doing today, though, I'm really excited to hear and curious about your journey that led you here. So rewind the clocks, whether that looks like junior high, high school, college. Like, what led you into this entrepreneur journey in the first place?
Yeah, well, it really goes back to elementary school. I was a little bit of an airplane nerd. Starting with fifth grade, I ended up going to space camp when I was in fifth grade. Became hooked on aviation and anything that dealt with space, airplanes, or anything in sky. Started playing Microsoft Flight Simulator shortly after that, and then the next thing I know, I found out about a youth program called the Young Eagles program when I was 12 years old. It's a worldwide program located in over 90 different countries around the world with the goal of giving, at the time, 1 million young kids between the ages of 8 to 17 an opportunity to take a free flight inside of a certified airplane. Took that very first flight in my hometown of Augusta, Georgia, got hooked on flying, and then just became the traditional airport kid. I started volunteering at my local airport when I was like 12, 13 years old, washing airplanes, taking out the trash. I mean, anything that I possibly could, just to be able to have an excuse to be around the airport and people wouldn't get annoyed and bothered with this 12-year-old kid hanging out there every single weekend. And in exchange, I got to know a couple of the pilots pretty well. And whenever they had an empty seat, they would give me the opportunity to go flying with them. And so I got an opportunity to get a few extra flying lessons for free by helping out at the local airport. And then once my parents saw that I was pretty serious about it, they gave me a small budget that allowed me to fly a couple times a month and start taking flying lessons.
Yep, love it, man. So you developed this early passion for flying. So how does that lead into, I guess, what you're doing now? Like, for example, a lot of us maybe adopt an early passion, right? And then, with life, we kind of take the normal life path of then maybe going to college and then kind of working in the corporate America, and then we discover our way back into business. What happened there? So, I mean, you developed this passion. How did, I guess, that turn into what it is today?
So believe it or not, when I first started up the first version of the company, I was 15 years old. And what ended up happening was I had petitioned the Federal Aviation Administration trying to get an exemption to fly solo before my 16th birthday. Unfortunately, learning how to fly and flying is a pretty expensive endeavor. On average, it costs about $150 to $200 an hour for a flying lesson. So imagine being a 15-year-old, 14-year-old kid trying to pay $200 for every hour of flight time that you're getting. It adds up pretty quickly. And so part of that expense, though, was paying someone $50, $60 an hour just to be sitting inside of an airplane. And after about 20 hours of flight time, I had gotten to the point where I could actually safely fly the airplane by myself. And it's like, why am I paying someone $60 an hour to babysit me? This just doesn't make sense. Where for every 2 to 3 hours of doing that, I could get an extra hour of flight time. So where the idea came from, I'm not 100% sure, but I got the idea to try to petition the FAA. During that time frame that I did that, I flew up to Canada, got my student pilot's license up there, came back to the United States, and after doing all that stuff, the FAA said, basically, we're impressed with everything that you've done. You traveled to a different country, got your pilot's license at a young age, did more than pretty much what anybody has ever done before to try to get this exemption. Unfortunately, we're still not going to give it to you. And so I had to start thinking a little bit outside of the box and try to figure out other ways that I could try to lower the cost of flying for myself. Or be able to afford to do it on my own. And after realizing I couldn't lower the cost of flying for myself, the only way I could fly as much as I wanted to was to be able to afford to do it on my own. So the idea of starting up my first company came to mind. I started off by selling flight training materials literally about $30 books and videos to local pilots in my hometown, and then created a website shortly after that. Started selling products online. Got a distributorship with a company called Gulf Coast Avionics, which is one of the largest avionics suppliers inside of the U.S. And that kind of helped grow. Next thing I knew, shortly before high school, I was doing well enough that I was able to purchase my own airplane. So my senior year of high school, I purchased the Christian Eagle II, which was a high-performance aerobatic biplane. And once I learned how to fly that airplane, I got certified to start flying air shows in it and started flying air shows all across the country. Had a chance to really fly at some major air shows up and down the East Coast. You know, it's kind of a cool feeling to be inside of an airplane and have 50,000 plus people sitting on the ground watching you perform. And the company just continued to grow. And through flying air shows and continuing to do the avionics distribution and doing some marketing things, I started to meet some really interesting people. And one of the people that I ended up meeting was in the process, or it was in the business of selling commercial aircraft. And after that, got the chance to get to know Arnold for a little bit. And he gave me my first opportunity to really try to go out there and start selling corporate airplanes. And after finishing the transaction for the very first corporate jet that I sold, I realized that it was something that I really wanted to be involved in. And, you know, now we're literally 17 years from the very first day that I sold my first kind of book, flight training book. So now having a company that hopefully is about to become the premier leader in personally flown fractionals. And what I mean by that is a company that someone has the opportunity to buy a share inside of a small airplane, whether it's a piston-powered airplane like a Cirrus SR22 or a light jet. And the space that's typically associated with the level of airplanes that people are flying themselves. But they have access to a fleet of brand new airplanes at a really inexpensive cost, cheaper than they can really get from any other ownership solution out there. And then they get this over-the-top, unbelievable concierge service attached to it too, where, you know, our goal is to hopefully make every single owner feel like they're flying on a Gulfstream 5, even though it might be a Cirrus SR22. And we combine that with a really economical cost solution for them. And it's been working out pretty well. We become the largest fleet operator of Cirrus SR22Ts on the East Coast. No other company out there right now has more SR22Ts in their fleet than what we do. That number's continuing to grow. We're buying more airplanes on that side. And we also just last year introduced a very first personally flown turbine fractional program as well. We're hoping to take delivery of a couple more Eclipse 550s inside of that fleet within the next couple of months. And we plan on continuing to grow both of those platforms all across the country as we continue to expand.
Yep, I love that, man. So going back though, you know, I'm really curious when you're 15, you know, and you know, you probably get delivered that news, you're probably crushed, but then sometimes those you know, moments of defeat then create some of the greatest opportunities, yep. Right? So, but you know, you get a lot of kids that might be looking at that kind of stuff and thinking, "Oh, I'm only 15, I'm only 16, I can't go out there and do these." And obviously, you figured out a way to make it happen at such a young age. Was that? I mean, were your parents entrepreneurial? Like, what gave you that drive and those ideas?
Not really. My dad's retired from the Army, and my mom's a physical therapist by trade. So it wasn't really so much the entrepreneurial spirit that came from the parents. It was more, to be honest, a solution to the problem. Starting up a company was not something that was, oh, when I'm 14, 15 years old, I want to start up my own company. That's not where it came from. It was, I'm in high school right now, full time. I don't have the time to be able to go out there and get a full-time job working as, you know, a doctor, lawyer, teacher, some of the other people that I saw that were flying the types of airplanes I wanted to fly. But I could start my own business that would give me the flexibility to do some of the things I wanted to do, similar to like some of the other people that I saw. And I also just knew getting a traditional teenage job wasn't going to give me the capital that I needed, that I wanted to be able to fly as much as I wanted. So it was more of a, if I look at all my options that are out there, this is the only one that I could realistically see that gives me the cash flow to be able to do what I want to do. And it grew from there, fortunately. But it really wasn't this grand scheme that I'm as smart as Warren Buffett or some major leader and had the vision to be able to see something 20 years down the road by any means. It was really just an opportunity to see a way that I could make my goals actually happen.
Yep. No, I love that, man. So, when you're doing this now, okay, so your entrepreneur journey starts because you want to solve this problem, so you can go out there and fly, and then it just keeps morphing into what it is today, if you will. When you started selling, the planes, if you will, because a lot of times we might jump into entrepreneurship and think it's going to be something, and we have successes with those, and people can hear the successes, but we don't always talk about some of those. I don't want to say failures because they're our best learning moments, but those obstacles where we really were able to grow and evolve and learn from in the heaviest fashion. What were some of those initial obstacles that you had to overcome that you weren't expecting, but that became just amazing growth moments for you?
There's been quite a few, but in reality, if you don't go through those, like you said, you're never going to continue to grow and become better. And as painful as they can sometimes be, as difficult as they can be, as stressful as they can be, it's needed. Just a couple quick ones off the top of my head. In 2009, the company started to do really well. I was buying and selling and also leasing airplanes. At one point, I was 22 years old and I owned probably about 12 airplanes that we were leasing out to flight schools across the country. We had airplanes in California, we had them in Florida, we had them in Michigan, and the company was just growing. When I set up the business model for it, I really kind of had real good data-driven metrics and numbers on things, and really stuck towards those in the very early days, until I got to the point where I thought, there's no way anything bad's going to happen. The economy is doing well at the time. The company is growing. And then, we have the 08-09 market collapse. One of our major customers that we had that had like 8 airplanes on lease with me ended up going out of business, not even Chapter 11, just straight Chapter 7. Huge ordeal, huge issue for us. And at the end of the day, it really put a strain on the company. And I went from, unfortunately, because I deviated from some of the way that I had originally planned on setting it up with reserve accounts and everything set up for the airplane, it was a really stressful time. We were able to, fortunately, live through it and still pay every single person every single dollar that we owed them, which I was fortunate and happy about. But it was definitely a stressful time period. And one of the things that I did learn is, when you come up with something that's working, and it is working, don't deviate from it just because times are good. Because when times do go bad, that initial game plan that worked will keep you afloat a lot easier than if you just deviate because you don't think that you need to have the reserves or restrictions that you put on yourself previously. Another thing is just from a leadership and an operational standpoint. One of the biggest things that I've learned over time is initially for first probably 12, 14 years of my business experience, I was primarily a one-man band. Maybe had a couple of people that supported me in different areas and positions, but it really, from a full-time employee standpoint, just a handful. And then that number grew. Today we have around 20 full-time employees that work at the company that really help us accomplish our mission of delivering this unbelievable owner experience to each and every one of our owners inside of our fractional program. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be able to do what we do. However, there's also an issue of, I'm a very loyal person. I'm someone that if you're with me through thick and thin, I'm going to be there with you through thick and thin. But sometimes you have to learn that the people who are there for you in the beginning aren't necessarily going to be the people that are there for you long term. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily anything negative about anybody. It's just a situation of people can outgrow their own strengths and weaknesses as the company continues to grow. You may have someone that is good for you to help you get the company off the ground. There may be, there to be in the trenches with you when there isn't enough capital inside of the company to keep things, paying the right way, all the issues that all startup companies typically go through. But then once you get to that stride and say you took it from the startup to maybe being a $10 million company now, and you're trying to take it from the $10 million company to the $100 million company, those are different strengths and weaknesses that you need to be able to have for some of the same positions that you would have had in the earlier stages. And if you don't have the right people in those positions, then it can fault or stunt the growth of the company. And that's definitely something that is very difficult to do. I was fortunate enough to go to an entrepreneur retreat in California a couple of years ago. And I had the opportunity to hear Kevin Plank from Under Armour speak. And he had mentioned that, he had shared a story similar of that, is that one of the big mistakes that a lot of entrepreneurs make is the fact that they stick too long without making the proper changes, even though that they know that those are changes that need to be made. And that's definitely one of the other mistakes that I think, or learning lessons that I guess I can say and share that I definitely have experienced and gone through. And there's just plenty of them. Each and every one of us have a ton of them that we do, but as you said early on, that if you don't go through those, you will not grow, you'll not become better, and you'll not become a better leader.
Yeah, and it seems as, your companies grow, and you're the CEO of your company, because you're not so then emotionally attached to all those people like you are in the beginning. When in the beginning, it's like, their kids, their family, and if they do become the wrong person for the wrong CEO or just the wrong person in general for the company, that becomes that hardcore emotional decision where, as you expand, you're kind of detached from it, if you will, and it's not quite as hard. But how do you do that, right? Because that's something a lot of people struggle with. It's like, okay, hey, man, if I've got this person that's been with me for years, help me, whatever, but maybe they get comfortable or whatever it may be, but you have that deep relationship. Like, how did you personally cope with that and overcome that?
It's difficult. The biggest thing that I can tell you that I started to have to think about from the company standpoint is, you give everybody an opportunity to grow and become better. And if for some reason it still doesn't work out, then you have to make some difficult decisions. And the biggest thing that you have to keep in mind is sometimes people can be in a critical enough position that they will hinder or hurt the entire company. And you have to think about, although people may be with you for X period of time, you may have a closer relationship with those people. They could be friends for life. However, is it worth potentially putting the entire company in jeopardy and all the other team members that work at the company, their livelihood in jeopardy, just for that one person? And I think if you sit down and honestly ask yourself that question, most people would probably say the answer to that is no.
Yeah. Yep. Love it. So explain what you mean by the fractional program that you guys have right now. Because it sounds like, you've come up with a really, because everybody thinks about, okay, if I'm going to own a plane, I got to be worth, massive amounts of money.
Sure.
And they have this idea of it, but it sounds like you've created this affordable option for kind of that in-between potentially, so can you walk us through what that means?
So basically for us, what we're trying to do is give people that have the need to occasionally have access to airplanes the opportunity to have access to it without having to buy the full share of the airplane or a full airplane. There was a company called NetJets that really founded this segment of the industry for us in the early mid 80s. And they are by far the dominant player on the large corporate aircraft market. A couple years ago, I started to think and say, the same benefits that apply for what NetJets has done for corporate aviation and flight options and FlexJet has done for corporate aviation applies to personally flown aviation. The segment of the industry where the general aviation recreational pilot flies at, where small businesses may need to have access to smaller airplanes. All those type of areas there are the space that we really operate in. We have no desire to compete against the FlexJets and NetJets of the world, but we have our own little space and niche of where we want to operate in. And we're basically trying to bring a timeshare kind of concept to personally flown aviation. And when it's done right, you get some really solid benefits off of it. You get the economics portion of it that you can't get that same type of ownership solution anywhere else if you did it, whether it's in a partnership with a bunch of people or whether it's owning the airplane outright by yourself. You get the concierge service that we talked about, which really takes all the hassles of aircraft ownership out of the equation. And then on top of that, you also get some of the fixed ownership cost standpoint. So one of the big things that makes owning airplanes expensive and why most people think that they have to be extremely wealthy to be able to do that is because you have a lot of unexpected expenses with it a lot of times. So, if a cylinder goes bad on a piston powered airplane, you have a landing gear issue on one of the larger airplanes. Those can be $15,000, $20,000 expenses any given time. Just to overhaul the engine on the Cirrus, which is our 4-seat piston powered airplane that we have, it's close to $80,000 just to be able to do that. And you got to do that every 2,000 hours of operation on it. So it gets expensive to be able to do that. Well, with our program, you have a shared ownership expense that you pay on a monthly basis. And in addition to that, there's no other cost for it. So when there's an issue with a maintenance item, we take care of it, and it's not something that you have to worry about. So you get fixed ownership expense, so you can kind of budget what it's going to cost you to be able to own the airplane. You get the same amount of access for it that you would get if you own the airplane by yourself. And then on top of that, you get a concierge service that eliminates all the ownership hassles typically associated with aircraft ownership.
So when you're putting this model together, because I would sit there and think, okay, if you have the shared model, there's going to be headaches that exist that you probably had to identify. Yeah, because maybe this person they buy into the share, but now they want more than their share is, or sure, whatever it may be. Like, how did you learn to manage that, and what were maybe some of those lessons that you had to learn managing it?
So one of the biggest things that I think that we've had to kind of identify and figure out on our own is what type of owners that we wanted inside of our program. And that definitely does happen. You definitely have some logistical issues that you have to occasionally work through. But the biggest thing is you pick the right type of owner / customer that you want to service. We've been fortunate that the majority of our owners, although they pay a fair amount of money for the product and the service that they receive, so they expect a really quality product and experience. We do provide that for them. But in addition to that, we've also picked people that are successful in their own rights. They understand what's operating a business is like. They understand that although they're paying for a service and they expect you to deliver on that service, and as long as you deliver on that service, they're typically pretty reasonable in other situations. I honestly can't tell you that I have very many owners and customers inside of our program that aren't realistic with their expectations and their requests. They pay for what they want. We deliver to them what they want, but then they don't necessarily expect to get ththings for free.
Yep. So, okay, I've got a good friend of mine that is a top speaker, top coach, and he's flying. He'll be in 3 cities in a day, and I'm always like, well, why don't you get your own plane, dude? Like this, but again, maybe have that concept of this has to be extremely more expensive than they think. At what point, economically, for an entrepreneur that is traveling a lot, does it kind of make sense to do this, where it makes sense more so to go this route compared to flying commercially?
It's really, when you factor in the value of your time, it almost becomes a no-brainer. But you have to factor in the value of your time for you to be able to truly justify flying privately. Or, and when I say value of your time, it may be the fact that you want to be able to spend time with your friends or family. It may be that you need to be able to get more work done inside of the office. I can tell you personally, there's a lot of cities I go to that we don't have necessarily great airline service to go into them. Or say, for example, I'll give you a really solid example for this. I go down to South Florida a good bit, where we have a second location in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and we'll go down there. I'll go work inside of the office all day, and then I'll go entertain a client for that evening and take them out to dinner, spend a little bit more time with them, get to learn them, or take a prospect out. If I was flying commercially, the last flight out that I'd probably be able to get is around 8 o'clock to be able to get back home. If I'm sitting there at an early dinner with them at 6, start to see things are going well with a prospect, and there's an opportunity that might be able to happen where we close the deal that evening, do I tell them, oh, look at my watch and say that, at 7 o'clock I've got to leave because I got to be at the airport, I'm already running late, and can we finish this up either later this week by phone or email, or maybe next time I come down there? Or do I just stay, get the job done, even if it does take me until 8, and then fly back once the deal is taken care of? And I have had that exact situation happen where it gives you the opportunity to close more business. I've also had the exact other option where you finish things early and you have the opportunity to go home earlier and get back into the office the same day when you weren't expecting it. And if you're flying on the airlines, the opportunities to be able to do that aren't as flexible as what it is when you're flying privately. It is definitely going to be more expensive. There's never going to be almost a situation where you can fly on coach on some airline at the same price that you can fly on a private airplane. It rarely ever works out that way. However, you can make it justifiable if you're out there closing deals and making things happen.
Yep, love it, man. So what is, because I would think with that model, I mean, it's got to be a challenge then with pilots, right? Because the pilot, you can't have, with the time schedule, so in that situation, the pilot's sitting around waiting for you to, okay, do I get done at 2? Do I get done at 8? Like, what are some challenges there that you have with that?
There's definitely a logistical side of the equation that's difficult to operate sometimes, especially because that's one of the main things we sell is the convenience of doing what you need to do on your own schedule, not somebody else's schedule. And I mean, sometimes you can have someone that's saying that they're going to be an 8 o'clock departure, and it really becomes an 11 o'clock departure. And then there's legal duty limits because we operate all of our non-pilot flights. So we do have a group of customers that are pilots that fly inside of the airplane. And then we have another group of customers that aren't pilots at all. And they're just people that sit in back and they want to own a share of an airplane. We operate all of those customers on a 135, which is a commercial air carrier certificate. And there are duty limits that the pilots are allowed to be able to fly on a 135 certificate. So logistically, it can become an issue. I mean, it could be that you end up flying pilots in to be able to pick up a flight. It could be that you have to delay departures for a certain time periods, which when you have customers that are paying a lot of money to be able to do a flight, that's the last thing that they want to hear is that they can't leave when they want to leave. So there's a lot of logistical planning issues and things that we have to sometimes factor into it that does make it very interesting.
So how do you, because it seems like, and I know that you kind of talked about, you had that experience before where you detoured, you veered off, but it seems like you're really good at connecting the dots and staying in a space where there's demand. But I can see also how it might be easy to keep expanding, keep growing, and keep veering off in other directions. I mean, how do you make decisions as an entrepreneur with the amount of growth and success that you guys are having now today to gauge it, to make sure that you're not going in that wrong direction?
It's trial and error in the very beginning. Now it's more of a data-driven approach that we stick with the data. Quick example and a learning lesson that we had on that. The company started to grow pretty well. We got into aircraft management, and it was a profitable division of the company for us. But it was also stressful, putting a strain on the rest of the company for us. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times in aircraft management, you're responsible for prepaying for the expenses with an airplane. So say, Josh, you buy an airplane, you hire our company to manage that airplane for you. We hire the pilots, we take care of all the maintenance on the airplane, we pay for all the fuel, and then at the end of the month, you'll get a bill from us once a month for everything that you spent the last month, plus a little bit of a markup attached to it. We'll make money on it, but if you are flying, an airplane and spent $60,000 a month with us that month, and we had the prepay for that, and we have, say, 5-7 of those contracts already out there, you're prepaying $300,000 a year, or a month, in expenses that you're waiting from customers to get paid back from. Some of those customers may be on a 30-day AP cycle, and then they're still flying the following month, and just say that they replicate that. So now you're at $600,000 prepaid expenses on behalf of clients that you're waiting to get prepaid on. And then you still have your other stuff that you have to do. Although you may be making money on it, the cost of actually floating that on behalf of your customers could be pretty expensive and damaging to the company. That's a situation that we actually got into. We had a profitable opportunity, started making money on it, but the amount of costs associated with operating that, because we had to float basically the expenses for the airplanes, was very expensive for us, and it was bigger than what we could manage at the time for the size of the company that we were. So we had to make the hard decision that although this is an area that we're having positive cash flow coming from on every single monthly basis, we're going to have to get rid of it and just focus on our core competency of being, the first personally flown timeshare company out there that has jets and piston products inside of our program. And once we started focusing just on exactly what we're doing and staying in our lane, we've done very well.
Yep, love it, man. So, you personally, you got into all this space because you just wanted to go out there and fly, and then now it becomes, this juggernaut business, and I'm sure a lot of hours, and have you been able to still maintain your love for flying with growing all of this? I mean, do you ever find yourself kind of deterring from the passion of why you started this? Is there a balance?
There's a difference, for sure. I think anytime that you do something that you love and it becomes your job, it becomes a little bit different. But I can tell you that every single time I hop inside the cockpit and I fly to go give a speech, or I fly to go to a meeting, or do whatever I'm going to a convention, it is by far one of the coolest experiences of my life. Although I may not do it the same way that I did when I was 15 years old, where I would just go fly around for an hour or two, I still get that motivation and that kind of inspiration every single time that the wheels leave the earth and you're flying at 30,000 feet above the ground going to some different place. It's kind of cool. I mean, it's cool to be able to be in a time machine that not only while you're traveling from, I can wake up in Atlanta, go to a different city or a couple cities, and then still be back home in my bed by the end of that day. That's a kind of cool experience to be able to do that on a very regular basis.
Yeah, so, we find in life so often that good becomes the worst enemy of greatness, right? It's so easy to get caught up in this good enough, life's good enough, and we stop just leveling up, and we see it happen all the time, right? What do you do personally? Because you sound like a guy that doesn't accept good enough, that you keep trying to level up in this life. What keeps you doing that instead of just saying, hey guys, things are good, let's just keep at the status quo? What keeps you personally not settling for good enough?
I haven't reached my goal yet, I guess, is part of it. What's going to happen once we do that will be a different story. But personally, I've been very fortunate and blessed that we have a solid team at Ascension. The company is going well. We're headed in the right direction. We're growing the fleet a little bit. Not as quickly as what I would like it to be, but we're growing. We're now have gone through a lot of a trial and error on a lot of things, and now kind of have a system that's working for the company, which is kind of nice to have. However, with all that stated, we're still not at the place that we want to be at. We operate in 2 locations right now. I would like that to be 10 plus locations across the country. I would like us to have a fleet of airplanes inside of us, and I would like us to be one of the premier options for people that want to have access to small airplanes. We're not there yet. So we still have a long way to go before we actually get to that point. I think the drive to be able to create something is one of those things that's probably the most motivating for me. It's not even necessarily now about, the money or anything along those lines that may potentially happen down the road. It's more about creating something that I'm one of those people that I guess another way of phrasing it is when people tell me no, that it can't be accomplished and that other people have tried and they've been unsuccessful at it, it causes me to try to do the research and figure out why they weren't successful, but then figure out a way to prove everybody wrong. And that's what I think is part of it, is overcoming the impossible.
Yeah, no. So we live in this time, this space where people today spend more time designing their grocery list than they ever do their life plan. Like people just never really think about it. Like how do you get clarity on what you want so you can set these goals and how do you walk yourself through that process? Because most people just they don't know where they want to be in 5 years. They don't have clarity on any of this.
Yeah, it's difficult, and it's really just trying to figure out what your life is all about. Some people, their life may be about making money. For some people, it's about making a difference in the world. For some people, it's about creating a legacy. I think each and every one of us has our own answers to what's important to them and what they need to do to accomplish what those goals are. But I think one of the things that we all do get distracted by is we get distracted by life. We get distracted by the hustle and bustle of what's going on, and we sometimes lose track and focus on those different things that are happening in our life. So for me, it's just reminding yourself, believe it or not, I have a goal sheet that I have on the back of my computer of what I want to do, and it has year, 3 and 5 year goals on it. And when I see it every single day, it's kind of like, okay, what am I doing to get closer to making that goal happen? What am I doing to get closer to make that goal happen? And just reminding yourself of it on almost a daily basis, I think helps me stay on track of what's important to me in my life. Whether it's personal, whether it's business, doesn't make a difference. It's just reminding yourself, a while back, this is what I said I wanted to do, and it still holds true today. And am I doing anything during this day today to be able to make that goal any more of a reality?
Yeah, no, I love it, man. Yeah, it's that intentional paying attention. Love it, man. So, if you could go back now, if like the Jamail today could go back and talk to the Jamail of, let's say, 18 years old, right? And you could go back and give yourself just a couple pieces of advice, knowing what you know now. What would you tell your younger self?
Wow. That's a good question on that one. I would probably have to say probably just some of the kind of simple mistakes that we've talked about. Become more data driven in the decisions that you make earlier on will help you out a lot. So although this may sound like a good idea on the surface, it looks good, is it really going to help you achieve what you want? And then secondly, I think the other big thing that I would say is remember to continue to make progress to reach your goals every day.
Yep, love it, man. So where's, somebody wants to learn more about your company, learn more about you. I know that you do a lot of speaking as well as running your businesses. Where's the best place, Jamail, for people to learn more about you at?
If they want to, they can go to ascensionair.net, which is our website, or ascensionaircraft.com. Either one of them will take you there. And we have a ton of information on there. Personally, I go around and travel a lot, give a lot of speeches. You can be reached on the Ascension Air website as well. And love to go out there.
Yeah, awesome, man. So what got you into speaking? What kind of led you down that path?
So when I was in high school, I became the national spokesman for the Young Eagles program, which was that youth program I took my first flight with when I was in middle school. They're based in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and through a series of events, somehow I became the national spokesman for them when I was in high school, and that started me traveling around the country, which has now become the world for me, and traveling around and talking to young people about their opportunities inside the aviation industry.
Yep. That's awesome, man. So, love it. All right. Well, I started this podcast. It's going on, maybe 18 months or so. And the reason I started the podcast is because we live in this time where it's like information overload. There's a lot of great information, but there's also a lot of bad information, and especially, as entrepreneurs are trying to grow their life, grow their business, there's a lot of these quote unquote gurus, and we see a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. So I was like, well, let me just create a place where we go out there and interview the doers, guys like yourself that are overcoming adversity, that are actually creating successful companies, that are in the trenches, to give that information back to, I do it for a selfish reason because I get to pick brilliant minds like yours all day, but then they're also able to take that information and grow. So with that being said, do you have any last words of inspiration or advice that you'd like to give our listeners with right now? Because they're here today listening to this because they want to go out there and create that life they know they want to deserve.
I think one of the biggest things that I would say is just dream big. I was a kid playing Microsoft Flight Simulator in my parents' house when I was about 10 years old. And I would have never thought in Augusta, Georgia, and I would have never thought that would have parlayed into a few years later of, becoming one of the youngest pilots to fly solo in Canada at the age of 14, petitioning the federal government, starting up my own company, purchasing my own airplane before I graduated high school. As I mentioned, becoming a national spokesman for a worldwide organization while I was in high school, and then started traveling around the world, to then creating this company that now 20 people make their full-time living at. And we're growing every single day in multiple operations. And the first one to kind of take the personally flown space in the timeshare fractional industry kind of hopefully by storm over time. Would have never thought all that and so much more would have happened, but all of that did happen, and it's all because of the dream. And despite the fact that a lot of people said no, find the right people to help you be able to make your dreams become a reality, and anything is possible.
Yep, love it. Powerful words. And to our listeners that are watching and listening to this, I know we end every podcast with this, you guys, but information without implementation is truly just the start of delusion. Information is not power. It's taking that information and applying it into your world, taking action on it that creates power for yourself. So Jamail shared so many just amazing pieces of nuggets, you guys, that you can take and apply to your life, apply to your business, take something that you learned today and take action on it. And Jamail, man, this has been a massive honor. I know you're an extremely busy guy. We really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here. Truly has been an honor.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, thank you so much, and we will see you next time.